and operating rules and the benefits of using them. In fact, entire sections of federal regulations are dedicated to analyzing the impact that standards and operating rules will have on the industry. And even though we speak in large, aggregated terms, sometimes that really doesn't tell the full benefit story. That's why we're excited to have with us today our colleague, Priscilla Holland from NACHA, the Electronic Payments Association, and 3 representatives from different sized healthcare provider organizations who are going to share with us not only the national picture of EFT ERA adoption, but also how these 3 have successfully implemented the EFT ERA standard and operating rules in their own operations with terrific outcomes. So let's begin. However, now we have some housekeeping issues to share with you. So here is our core Senior Associate, Tyler Schultz, to take us through them. Tyler?
Thank you, Denise, and good afternoon to everyone who's able to join today. As you can see here from this slide, a few housekeeping items we'd like to just get through first before we can jump into the presentation. First, you can download a copy of today's presentation from the CAQH.org website. To do so, navigate to the core pull-down menu at the top of the CAQH.org welcome screen and select the Core Education Events page. A link to the PDF version of the presentation can be found under the listing for today's webinar. On this slide, you will see a screenshot of the attendee GoToWebinar dashboard. You should see something that looks similar to this on the right side of your computer desktop. When joining today's session, it's possible that you may have joined the audio portion of the webinar using your computer speakers by default. If possible, we would prefer you to join the webinar audio by telephone. To do this, please select the telephone radio button in the audio panel of your dashboard, and the dial-in information will be displayed. Make sure you enter in your audio PIN, which is found under your dial-in information, so we can unmute your line later in the program during our Q&A session. Time at the end of today's program will be dedicated to responding to your questions. You are encouraged to submit your questions at any time during this webinar by typing them into that questions panel on your dashboard. We do ask that you please identify the type of organization you are with at the beginning of any questions so that we can give you a more accurate response. We will also be taking audio questions from the audience over the telephone at the end of today's session. When we begin the audio portion of the Q&A session, you may raise your hand using the hand raise tool found on your webinar dashboard. When it is your turn to ask a question, the moderator will unmute your line and you can begin. Please hold off on using the hand raise tool until prompted to do so, as we will be putting all hands down at the beginning of audio Q&A. Once again, in order for your line to be unmuted, you must enter your audio PIN on your telephone keyboard. And one last item before we jump into the presentations, we have a first polling question for all of those of you who have joined today. We have the question, which stakeholder type best describes your organization? I'm going to now launch this polling question. Please select it in the first 30 to 45 seconds we'll give everybody, and I'll show everybody the results. So let's go ahead and begin. I will launch it now and give you about 30 to 45 seconds. Give it about 10 more seconds here. If you have not yet voted, please select one of the options. Thank you. Excellent. I'll now close the poll, and I will share the results. Thank you everybody for participating in the poll. I'll be back again a couple of times with a couple more polling questions throughout the presentation. But with that, I'll now go ahead, hide the results, and I'm going to turn it over now to Denise with today's session content. Denise?
Thanks, Tyler. So on slide number 4, you'll see that today we're first going to talk about CORE's role in EFT ERA, and that presentation will be given by our own Matthew Albright, our CORE Senior Manager. And then I'll be very happy to introduce Priscilla Holland, NACHA Senior Director for Healthcare Payments. She'll guide us into the latest NACHA intel on EFT and then introduce the 3 guest speakers. Finally, we'll talk about both NACHA and core resources and then take as many questions as we can at the end. So Matthew, I'll let you kick it off.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you all for joining us today. I echo Denise's sentiments. We're very excited about today's webinar. You know, there's still obstacles and issues in implementing the EFT and ERA transactions, but the stories that we will hear today demonstrate the tremendous work that industry has done so far in finding efficiencies in the payment of healthcare. And I think today's webinar will remind us of the progress and accomplishments that have been made in administrative simplification. As well, we hope this presentation paints a picture of how much is still possible. The development and implementation of the standards and operating rules on the healthcare EFT and the subsequent cost savings in their implementation could not have been possible without the unique and unprecedented collaboration between the healthcare industry and the financial sector. And key to the whole development and implementation of EFT in the healthcare space has been Priscilla Holland, Senior Director at NACHA, the Electronic Payment Association, who, like we've said, we're very excited to have presenting today. Priscilla has been an untiring supporter of administrative simplification. Her contribution and the contribution of NACHA in helping providers and health plans move toward more efficient payment methods cannot be overstated. If the healthcare industry had Academy Awards, then Priscilla would win something shiny for being such a force in implementing efficiencies through EFT. We'll turn it over to Priscilla in just a moment, but I'm going to talk briefly about what these transactions are and what the core operating rules are that apply. So this first slide illustrates the flow of the EFT and the ERA, and I'm looking specifically at that illustration at the bottom of the page. The high-level flow of the transaction is basically 2 separate but related transmissions, the EFT and the ERA, that, like other administrative transactions, are sent from the health plan and received by the provider. The EFT, of course, is the money itself, the funds, the payment information. The ERA explains what those funds are, that is the remittance advice that describes what was or was not paid for with the funds. The difference from other administrative transactions is that the ERA is sent through EDI systems from the health plan to the provider. And you see that top arrow describes the path, electronic remittance device from the claims processing of the health plan to the billing collections of the provider. While the EFT is sent first as an order from the health plan to the health plan's bank, and you see that health plan treasury sends it first to the bank, then as a financial transaction between the health plan's bank and the provider's bank, then finally the funds are deposited in the provider's account and show up in an account statement for the provider. The takeaway from this slide, then, is that the EFT and ERA transaction is a complicated one, with unique handoffs between the financial sector and healthcare entities, and a unique coordination that is necessary between the treasury part of provider and health plan organizations and claims and billing parts of those healthcare organizations. Next page, please, Sally. As we will hear later, the first thing the feds did was to adopt an EFT standard. The EFT standard is actually a kind of order form that health plans must use to tell their banks to transmit healthcare payments. The standard also included what information must be included in that EFT. Next, CAQH core participants came together and developed operating rules that would apply to both the EFT and the ERA. Now, these rules were meant to address many of the pain points that providers found when they tried to implement EFT and ERA in their systems. For instance, the inconsistent use of CARCs and RARCs among health plans was and continues to be a pain point for providers in trying to settle their accounts. So here we see in the first row a rule that begins to address that. This CARC and RARC rule was actually referred to specifically just this morning by a representative from the American Medical Association at the NCBHS meeting held here in Washington. And the representative stated that the rule has been very useful for providers and that more rules like this were necessary since the CARC and RARC rule is unique and that it includes a maintenance process that gives the industry the ability to be flexible and nimble, developing operating rules to meet new and emerging needs and issues. And we've had some very active providers involved in that maintenance process. Other rules that targeted specific provider pain points included the enrollment rules, the reassociation rule, and the infrastructure rules. And I'd like to spend just a moment on the reassociation rule. Next page, please, Tyler. So a big pain point for providers was the difficulty in reassociating the funds deposited through the EFT with the information delivered through the ERA. As we saw on the slide before last, different departments within health plans and provider organizations often handle the EFT and ERA respectfully. And the EFT goes through the banks that add their own information to the payment. So it was very difficult for providers to link the information from these two separately sent transmissions, and we'll hear that from the providers today as well. With regard to the reassociation issue, let me tell you the story of the 10-minute discussion that saved millions of dollars. Early on, when CAQH core participating organizations were in meetings developing the operating rules, the subject of the trace number came up. Now, the trace number is key to this reassociation problem because the trace number is the number in the ERA that links the same trace number that should be included in the EFT. Providers need that number in order to reassociate the two, the EFT and the ERA. But providers were not getting this number through the EFT. So the discussion ensued, and some health plans said that the banks did not allow them to include the trace number, and the providers said that when they asked for the trace number, it never matched, and it went round and round until someone realized that they were talking about two different trace numbers. The banks generate a trace number for their own needs, while health plans could input an 835 trace number, and it could be delivered to the provider unchanged and untouched if the health plans put it in the right data field. And so within 10 minutes, within a 10-minute conversation, the healthcare industry solved the problem of reassociation that had plagued them for years. And all it took was a conversation. That speaks to the value of getting on these CAQH core subgroups and getting involved in rule development. Many problems are solved and millions saved when you just get people to talk to each other. Next page. So I'll leave this page to your reading pleasure because we're going to hear from the providers themselves today how they benefited from implementing EFT and ERA. Now, again, we're very excited today to hear from our presenter, Priscilla Holland, Senior Director of Healthcare Payments for NACHA, the Electronic Payment Association, and I think I'm handing it to either her or Denise at this time.
Matthew, I think you're handing it to me. This is Priscilla, and thank you for your very kind words. I do appreciate them. NACHA is very excited to participate and to do the joint webinar with CAQH Core to talk about the benefits that the healthcare industry is achieving with the automation of the EFT and the ERA. NACHA has been working with Core almost since I think Core was founded, and we are NACHA. I'll talk about who NACHA is in just a few minutes, but NACHA has worked with the providers that you're going to hear from today to document some case studies on the benefits that different size organizations are actually receiving from the automation of the EFT and ERA. We're going to hear from a single doctor or micropractice with Leanne D. Domenico, is the Administrative Director of Performance Pediatrics. We are also going to hear from Eric Brodsky, who is the Director of Billing and Operations for the Midwest Center for Women's Health Care. And that is a good-sized practice that has moved to receiving EFT and ERA. And then we'll finish up with Doug Downey, who is the VP of Treasury with HCA, the largest hospital corporation in the United States, and hear about the different ways the automation has improved each of their organizations and the benefits they've found from actually having a standard implemented and standardized operating rules. So, Tyler, if you go to the next slide, I'll talk briefly about NACHA. For those who are not aware of NACHA, we are actually in the financial services area. We are the private sector rulemaking organization that administers the rules and guidelines for the ACH network. NACHA was recognized as the standards organization for the Healthcare EFT standard, and we develop and maintain and enforce the NACHA operating rules. So outside of the HIPAA process, we are actually we do enforce the NACHA operating rules. So if you'll go to the next slide, slide 12, we're actually looking at the Healthcare EFT standard was identified in federal regulation. It was identified as the NACHA CCD plus an addenda record. What this has done is stated that the NACHA, it's a corporate-to-corporate transaction, is the Healthcare EFT standard. The addenda record is remittance data that's carried with the payment, and the regulation states specifically what has to be in that addenda record. So it is version 5010. It is at the reassociation trace number, the TRN reassociation trace number, as defined by the X12835 TR3 report. And as Matthew indicated earlier, when the healthcare industry and the banking industry sat down, we found out that we have a lot of terms that are used in both industries. Unfortunately, they have a tendency to mean different things. So the TRN reassociation trace number is very, very different from the ACH trace number, but we do have the ability to carry that TRN reassociation trace number through the ACH network, and the NACHA operating rules require that the provider's financial institution must deliver that information if it's requested by the provider. So going on to the next slide, one of the things that NACHA has done since we've started working with the healthcare industry is made changes to our operating rules and to our format that allow us to identify specific healthcare transactions as they flow through the network. The CCD transaction that I mentioned, that is the Healthcare EFT standard, that CCD is utilized by all industries. It is a corporate-to-corporate transaction. So we wanted to identify how, we wanted to figure out how to identify specifically healthcare transactions that utilize the CCD format. And so we made changes in 2013, and the industry has adopted those. So we have been able for the first time to actually track the volume of healthcare transactions flowing through the network. In 2014, we actually saw a 105% increase in the volume of healthcare transactions going through the network, and we saw 149.3 million healthcare transactions. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is basically 2014 and January through January of 2015, and you'll see some ups and downs in the volume transactions. Since this is the first time we've actually tracked the volume, there's not a lot of history to rely on. But if you look between June 2014 and July of 2014, you'll see a significant increase in the volume. That was when Medicare made the changes to their system so that we could identify their transactions flowing through the network. So there was an identifiable jump there. Now when you go to the November, December of 2014 and January of 2015, the November 2014 is a lower number because of the reduced processing days for the month of November. The actual daily transaction volume was higher than the daily transaction volume in October, but then we saw a decrease in January of 2015 that at this point, other than saying it could possibly have been the severe weather that caused some impacts, we really at this point don't have an idea and don't have any history to see whether this is a cyclical decrease in transaction volumes. So hopefully next year we'll be able to answer that question. Going on to the next slide, what we've seen in talking to a number of the healthcare providers on the value proposition that is received by the providers and the health plans is the fact that from a provider perspective, they're receiving their payments, health plan payments, faster. They're able to bill and collect the remaining patient payment responsibility. I can't say that one quickly. The deductibles sooner, or the outstanding balances when you have the high deductible health plans. So being able to collect that patient responsibility more quickly is becoming very important. The ease of payment, the claim payment reconciliation is something that we hear over and over again. Automating the process helps reduce posting errors. It reduces the administrative work and the days in the accounts receivables. It is moving from paper to EFT, and ERA is improving the receivables processing. And then there's actual specifics from the 2013 CAQH U.S. Efficiency Index report that states from a provider's perspective, they estimate that you save $1.53 per payment, and from an industry perspective, they're looking at $1.98 per payment. So if you go to the next page, we're going to look at the specific case studies in a high-level perspective. As I indicated earlier, we have documented the 3 case studies. They are on the NACHA website. We're going to look from a single doctor micropractice, a mid-size provider practice that has 56 providers, and then the third case study is a large hospital group. So it is giving you a variety of different practice sizes to see what the benefits are to the different groups. And at this time, I think Tyler has a another polling question, and then we'll turn it over to Leanne.
That's right. Thank you very much, Priscilla, and thank you again, Matthew, as well. We have our second polling question. The question states, please indicate the extent to which your organization sends or receives healthcare payments through EFT, and that's referring to ACH network only. I'll go ahead and now launch this poll. I'll give it about 30 to 45 seconds for an answer, and we'll go ahead and begin now. We'll go ahead and give it about 10 more seconds. So if you have not yet voted, please vote now. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you. Again, thank you for participating in our polls throughout the presentation. I'll be back once again with our final poll question in just a few minutes. But with that, I'll go ahead and hide the results and move on to our first panelist in our case study, Leanne DiDomenico. Leanne?
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Leanne DiDomenico. I am the co-founder and administrative director of Performance Pediatrics. We are a primary care pediatric micropractice located in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Let's go on to the next slide, please. For those of you who might not be familiar with the micropractice model, providers in a micropractice see about half the number of patients a day as a typical provider would, and then make up for the lower revenue by having little to no staff and very low overhead. We have 2 providers, 1 MD and 1 nurse practitioner, for our 730 patients. We conduct 45-minute well exams, run on time every day, easily accommodate same-day appointment requests, and never have more than a 1-week wait for a well exam or a routine follow-up appointment. Our patients love us. We are small and we are fiercely independent, but we are not alone. We are part of a strong independent physicians association, or IPA, based out of Boston Children's Hospital. In exchange for meeting a number of quality measures, we are allowed to partake in the hospital's contracts with insurance payers. For what we're talking about today, at this point in time, we have nearly all, about 95% of our payers, communicating with us via ERA and paying us via EFT. Although I wish it was 100%, because in our micro-practice model, utilizing technology is key to keeping overhead low. I alone am a one-woman billing department, and it's only 25% of my job. Technology and automation are how we keep overhead low and ultimately how we serve our patients so well. So we have been a paperless office since we opened in 2006. We use an integrated EHR practice management system called Office Practicum. They are a small software vendor based out of Pennsylvania that specializes in serving primary care pediatricians. In 2010, we also started working with a clearinghouse called Instamed. We chose them because they were seamlessly integrated into our EHR practice management system, and today we are very happy with both vendors. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So next I'm going to talk a bit about what it was like for me before ERA and EFT. And this won't be a surprise to many of you, but of course everything was processed manually. I printed and mailed claims, and then after waiting 4 to 6 weeks, received paper checks and paper EOBs that had to be manually reconciled in my practice management system. I then had to physically drive to a bank, fill out a deposit slip, and deposit the check. Before I worked in healthcare, I worked at a dot-com startup in 1999, and I remember thinking, and as I was driving to the bank in 2007, what is wrong with the healthcare industry that in the 21st century, paper checks are still the main way that we move money and settle accounts? The process was labor-intensive and slow, and also, I'm not afraid to admit this, but I made a lot of mistakes with manual processing. For example, if we saw a patient several times in 1 month, I might apply a credit to the wrong date of service, or if we saw siblings or twins on the same day, I sometimes applied those credits incorrectly. It turns out that there are things computers and technology are just better at than people, and data matching and moving money are definitely two of them. Like I mentioned before, in 2010, in order to increase efficiency, we added the integrated clearinghouse, and what a difference it made. Next slide, please. Now, for us, once we started working with the integrated clearinghouse, for the payers that offered ERA and or EFT prior to the 2014 mandate, it was wonderful. The benefits of ERA and EFT were immediately realized. Instead of mailing paper claims and waiting 4 to 6 weeks, I submitted electronic claims and received ERAs sometimes as quickly as 7 days later. Also, instead of leaving my office and driving to a bank, money owed to me was directly deposited into my account, ready for me to spend on things that were important to me, like stickers to stop a crying child who just received a vaccination and things like that. And last but not least, my manual processing error rate went to practically nothing, since the computer wasn't likely to confuse twins John and Jack Smith like I was. One key point is that our clearinghouse handles practically all ERA, EFT, our technology vendors to do that back-end technology piece for us. But of course, prior to the 2014 mandate, not all payers were cooperative. Only about 65% of my payers offered ERA, and even less, about 45% offered EFT. The mandate to offer both was has hugely improved our practice's ability to keep overhead low, which is how we can offer exceptional care to our patients. And like I said before, we are close to 100% thanks to those mandates. From my perspective, the better regulation and clearer rules have led to much better efficiencies, and to that end, I do all I can to support CORE and NACHA to further this cause. Thank you for listening, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
Thanks, Leanne. This is Eric Brodsky, and I am the Director of Billing and Operations from Midwest Center for Women's Health Care. And next slide, please. And so just a little bit about our organization here. You can see on the screen who we are. We are essentially 11 separate OBGYN care centers, all rolled under one tax ID number. And my role here is mainly to run the business office for those care centers. All services that are performed in those offices eventually roll up here to our business office. Claims are submitted electronically, mostly, here through our business office, and payments are received back here in our business office as well. So all the processing, the financial processing happens here centrally. Up until recently, we just centralized our accounting, and up until then, most of our payments, when they were received here at our business office, would then go on to each of those care centers, because they would then process their own accounting and payables and receivables. So it was very important that we make sure that we received our payments here in a timely manner and make sure that the accounting part of that was correct. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we had here was that we wanted to be able to have electronic remittances and electronic funds for all of our the payers that we work with, and having to deal with some of the payers and getting on board with that has been difficult. And so we decided to start with the major payers, and you can see that we worked with Aetna, United, Humana, Cigna, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then have been slowly working to convert those smaller insurers over time. And there's still some out there that are lacking in their technology and being able to provide electronic remittances and electronic funds transfers, although that is a violation of law. Getting them to acknowledge that is a whole different ballgame. 55% of our patients have Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, and one thing that we recognized once we did convert to EFT for them was that they offer payments on a daily basis. They offer to send us those electronic payments on a daily basis. We were receiving paper checks for them and spending hours and hours each day processing the payments that we received from them. And now we get payments on a daily basis, so it's broken down into a smaller batch each day, and my staff is able to work them in much, much faster time frame. So that really made a difference. Yes, you can see that we're only at 90% of our remittance and payments, but that's due to the fact that the payers are less willing to be compliant with that. It's interesting, most of the payers we encounter offer ERA, but maybe not EFT, or it's difficult to determine where the EFT sign-up is or get to the right people to get that processed. But we do have a couple of payers where it's the opposite. They actually pay us electronically but do not offer ERA. So that still causes those issues. Again, our goal is to receive all payments electronically. Next slide, please. And so through the implementation of ERA and EFT, we definitely saw a difference in the savings with our staffing. We currently have 3 people here in my office that post payments on a daily basis. We just added a 4th person, but she's just a backup for when any of those people are out. 3 people, and most of the time, those 3 individuals are finished before the end of the day, and they take on other activities. And what's interesting about that is that when I first started with our company 7 years ago, we had about, I think it was about 35 providers, and now we're up to 56. And you can see that we really haven't added any staff at all. And we've increased our volume tremendously. In 2014, we submitted 136,000 claims. We've also been able to cancel our lockbox services. We were paying our bank to process all the payments that were received, but we realized that once we signed up for electronic funds transfer, we were able to remove that service and then accordingly process everything internally here. We still receive some payments, especially payments from patients on paper, although we do offer electronic bill payment for patients. Some still send us paper checks, but that's done here in the office in a minimal amount of time every day. One thing to point out is that MGMA's standards for days in accounts receivable, which they say days in AR, is around 30 or so on the average, and maybe 30 to the mid-30s. And when I started here, my predecessor had our numbers at around 25 or 26 days in AR. Due to the increase and implementation of EFT and ERA, we are now at 13 days in accounts receivable. So that means that in less than 2 weeks, on average, we receive payments for all of the services that are being provided to us. And statistics show that, and there's been studies done, that regardless of the industry, regardless of the economic background or the situation of any patient or the person who's going to pay the bill, that if you get them their statement to them in a timely manner, and if you get it to them earlier, they are more likely to pay their bill. So following those standards, doing everything electronically allows for us to get those statements out to those patients, and therefore they're more likely to pay. So it falls down the line that we're able to save in other areas with less follow-up on phone calls, less staff time analyzing accounts, because we're getting this done in a more efficient manner. And then again, as it's been echoed earlier, reducing billing errors. Absolutely. My staff here, they're not perfect. They're human beings. They make mistakes. Less keystrokes by hand will result in less and fewer mistakes and allow us to be able to process the information correctly the first time. Next slide, please. So just some tips about that. You want to make sure that when you do sign a contract or you renegotiate a contract with any of the payers, find out what they do for EFT and ERA, get that going right away. We just had a new payer that was just created here locally in Illinois, and the minute that I heard that we were going to be submitting claims to them, I went straight to their website and contacted their network department and found out not only how to submit claims electronically to them, but how we could sign up for ERA. They sent me a form immediately, and we've got that going right from the start. You want to work with your clearinghouse. That's important. That's key to it, because they're the gateway to the outside world when you're sending your claims. But they will help you certainly with your electronic remittances, but they don't always have the electronic funds transfer information. But you can talk to them and see if they have that information available with some of the payers. In my case, our clearinghouse does have some of those connections to the people who offer the EFTs, and they forward those forms on to us so that we can get signed up for those immediately. And lastly, watch out for those virtual cards. So that's been happening as of late in the past couple of years in the industry. Insurance companies are sending out notices to providers asking for payment through their electronic processing, where they would offer for us to pay them and have it processed via a virtual credit card. The downside of that is that they will take a processing fee out of the payment that you receive for that. The problem there is that what people don't realize is that if you don't accept those payments, you're still going to get paid from the payers. They've made it seem as if this is the only way you'll receive your payment, and that's not the case. So you never want to look towards accepting those virtual cards unless there's some unique situation. Make sure you sign up with them directly for electronic funds transfer and avoiding these virtual credit card payments. And with that, I'm going to switch it over to our next panelist. It's Doug Downey. He's the Vice President of Treasury at Hospital Corporation of America. Take it away, Doug.
Thank you, Eric. And Tyler, we can go on to slide 28. We'll jump right in. A little background and level setting on Hospital Corporation of America. $38 billion in annual revenue. Obviously, a number of hospitals, acute care hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, and physician practice management offices spread across the United States of America, as well as in England. The most important point on slide 28, I think, is the last one, that roughly 5% of anything that happens in the world of inpatient care is delivered by HCA, which gives us a unique perspective and sometimes an early signal of positives as well as negatives that go on in our industry. So Tyler, let's go on to 29, please. You can see from our steady process here, our timeline, that from 1995 until 2005, even though it says that we steadily converted checks to EFT, our progress was very slow. And obviously it was slow because we had to work health plan by health plan to try to gain a common understanding of the benefits of electronic payment. And in many cases, that conversation was one that was difficult, and more times than not ended with no movement away from payment by check. And once we got to the end of 2005, we decided as an organization to form a task force that we, without much, I guess, uniqueness to naming it, it is our EFT and ERA task force that we organized with a focused effort on moving check payments to electronic payments. So from 2006 through the end of 2013, we had more of a focus and a combined effort between our billing and collections system and our information technology group and the Treasury Department to work together to poll and contact our health plans and get a combined solution of an electronic remittance advice and an electronic payment. So we had some moderate success, as you can see, over those 7 or 8 years, that from a high of 3.5 million checks to the end of 2013, we were down to 2.5 million checks, and I can update that 2014 reflected 2.3 million checks that we processed. So January 1st of 2014 gave us another opportunity to continue this momentum, but obviously increase it. So we adopted and built our own internal process to do the reassociation of EFT and ERA, and embarked upon an effort to move electronic payments from our legacy electronic lockboxes over to what we refer to as our Affordable Care compliant electronic lockboxes. And in 2014, processed slightly more than 89,000 electronic payments. You can see the dollar amount referenced on the slide, and successfully reassociated those payments with the electronic remittance advices for perfect payment posting. Now, that volume is perhaps a little misleading, as we gradually built our volume throughout the year. So we expect 2015 to show some dramatic improvements, and I think even the forecast of more than doubling is probably conservative at best. Tyler, let's go to our last slide, slide 30. Certainly the EFT standard has provided the momentum that we needed in order to get our health plans that we work with more in tune with electronic payment, and obviously responding to our requests. And I will echo the other comments that have been made that unfortunately there is still, in our opinion, a significant part of the health plan industry that is not yet compliant with the Affordable Care Act. And I realize that it takes a lot to get to this point, and it's certainly our hope and desire that segment of the industry will rapidly move to compliance. We're recognizing about 70% reduction in processing costs once we move a check payment to an electronic payment. And our reassociation process, we have built into it a recycle process. So we're showing statistically now through a little more than a year that on day 0, and day 0 is defined by the day that the electronic payment arrives, that 83% of those electronic payments are matching to an electronic remit on day 0, which indicates that a significant portion of the health plan industry is delivering their electronic remittance advices compliantly with the Affordable Care Act, and we're getting them in advance of the settlement of the electronic payment transaction. By the end of day 1, our reassociation match jumps to 97%, and by the end of day 2, it jumps to 98%, which we think is a pretty significant administrative simplification move because, again, once we match, it's perfect posting, and it eliminates anything in the background that might have historically had to been dealt with to reassociate money with information. Our recycle process, we allow for 5 days, but our statistics are now showing that it's probably going to be in our best interest to shrink our recycle process down to 2 days past day 0, and that way we won't have the unapplied cash residing in our recycle process any longer than it has to, and that remaining 2% comes out on a non-match report, and we deal with that manually. And certainly this hasn't gone without challenges, and I'll close my comments with just a few points about challenges that we've encountered. Even best efforts of payers, they're in some cases outsourcing the EFT process and the creation of the ACH CCD Plus to their banks, and in some cases the banks have not always properly formatted that EFT transaction, so we've had to work somewhat of a painstaking process back through the health plans to their originating banks to correct those issues. We've encountered other situations where health plans have outsourced their EFT and ERA originations to a clearinghouse and experienced some delays and disconnects when the health plan asks us to re-enroll with the clearinghouse that they've outsourced to. And we've encountered some health plans and their clearinghouses that have relatively inflexible processes when it comes to an organization the size of HCA and the many hundreds of tax ID numbers that are in play in any given day. We've also encountered some health plans that have retained a Plan B in case they have failures in delivering their information to their clearinghouse, and in some cases the payers have sent one-off electronic transactions in a non-compliant format to an incorrect bank account, and that has created some challenges for us as well. So, you know, it's a great process. We've proven in this conversation today across a continuum of organizational sizes that this can work, and you know, over 15 and 16 and 17, hopefully it will become a more refined process, and we'll have total acceptance in the health plan sector, and we'll work out some of the remaining inefficiencies of the formats and the transaction. So, Tyler, with that, I'll conclude my remarks and turn it back to you.
Thanks very much, Doug, and thank you again to Leanne and Eric. Certainly a lot of insights to be pulled from each of your experiences, and we really appreciate the time and you sharing it. With that, Doug, so we'll get into our final poll question here. The question is, has your use of EFT for healthcare payments saved your organization time or money? We'll go ahead and launch the poll now. Once again, I'll give it about 30 to 45 seconds. If you wouldn't mind participating, I'll share the results. Okay, now I'll go ahead and launch this question. All right, everyone, we'll give it about 10 more seconds here. Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I'll go ahead and close this poll and share the results. This will be the final poll of the day. With that, Priscilla, I'm going to go ahead and toss it right back over to you. We'll get going here.
Okay, great. If you'll put us on slide 33, that would be great. One of the things I wanted to talk about very quickly before we start taking questions is perceived barriers to EFT and ERA, and from both the core operating rules perspective and from the research that we did prior to the development of the core operating rules, one of the primary barriers that we can continue to hear to a provider enrolling in EFT or accepting EFT payments is actually the enrollment, because as a provider you need to enroll in each of the health plans individually. So one of the things we've looked at very quickly here was different ways to approach this and prioritizing the payers. As Eric had indicated earlier, one of his major companies, or one of his health plans, is a largest portion of his the funds that his practice receives. So starting with those bigger health plans enables him to achieve the benefits more quickly. Another one was to work with clearinghouses. Leanne mentioned that, so did Eric, and so that's something else that you can consider in making enrollment much easier. But the third one we have is a utility that has been developed by CAQH. And, Tyler, if you go to the next slide, the Enroll Hub that CAQH has developed is a database that allows providers to participate in this Enroll Hub for free. You go in, your information is secure, you put in all of your information once, and then you indicate which of the participating health plans will receive that information. So it is specific to individual providers to say, yes, I work with these different health plans, and that information is sent out. The additional benefit of these type of enrollment, or this Enroll Hub situation, is that if your checking account information changes, you can do again a notification of the health plans through a centralized location of changes to that. And going to the next slide, some of the benefits of the Enroll Hub situation are basically it's a one-stop shop. It's no cost to the providers. It is secure. It is flexible. And if you're interested in additional information, there is a link at the bottom of the slide, this slide, that you can link to get more information or to participate in the Enroll Hub the service. Going to the next slide, one of the things that we need to make sure that you're aware of is that it is a provider's right to choose how they receive their claims reimbursement payments. Under HIPAA, the provider has the choice of how they want to receive payments, and it's important that they understand their rights and exercise those rights. So whether you as a provider want to receive your claim reimbursement payments through EFT, whether you want to receive them as a check, or if you want to accept virtual card transactions, that's your choice. But if you go to a health plan and ask them for to receive your claims reimbursements by using the Healthcare EFT standard, the health plan is under HIPAA is required to actually deliver that payment using the ACH network. Going on to the next slide, there has also been a question with regards to some of the health plans charging for delivery of the Healthcare EFT standard and what they can charge for. Under HIPAA, the providers are not allowed to, or health plans are not allowed to charge excessive fees. You are not allowed to delay or reject transactions because the provider has requested delivery of the HIPAA standard. And but it is important that providers recognize that they need to analyze their agreements that they receive from the health plans to understand what the fees are being charged for. We have been made aware of the fact that There are some health plans that want to charge basically a percentage of the transaction value to deliver the ACH transaction. Make sure that you understand whether that is for basic services, just the ACH transaction, or if the health plan is offering value-added services to that. But do make sure that you understand what is included in your agreement and what you are agreeing to before you sign your agreement. Now, please go to the next slide. One of the things that has been mentioned a couple of times today is the fact that there are a number of health plans that are not currently offering the Healthcare EFT standard or the ERA. ERA is a HIPAA standard that should have been offered years ago by all of the health plans, and now the Healthcare EFT standard was effective January 1st of 2014, and all health plans should be offering that service if it is requested by their providers. If a provider finds that they are not, the health plan is not willing to offer this, there are a couple of things you can do. You can talk to the compliance officer at the health plan and make them aware of the fact that under HIPAA they have to offer this. If they still don't offer to send the claim reimbursement payments via the NACHA CCD plus the addenda record, the next step is to file a HIPAA complaint with CMS. There is a link on this page as to how to do that. And if you are concerned about repercussions from that, please be aware that you can file an anonymous HIPAA violation with CMS or a HIPAA complaint. Going to the next page again, NACHA has resources. Tyler, if you'll go to the next page. NACHA has a number of resources that we have put together for the Healthcare EFT standard. This is our microsite that we do have on the NACHA site. And then if you go to the next slide, Tyler, this is a list of the NACHA resources that are currently available. One more slide, Tyler. There you go. I do want to point out from the health plan perspective, we do have information on the Healthcare EFT standard on our website. There is also a publication available. And from a provider perspective, we have an ACH primer here that is a PDF file that you can download that explains the healthcare payments in the healthcare language. So hopefully those will, all of those resources will help the industry in their move to utilizing the Healthcare EFT standard. And Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm afraid we're out of time, but if anybody has a question, we will try.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. And I'll also pull in Denise here to help me kind of co-host. Denise, is there anything you want to mention before we get into any Q&A if we do have the time? I know we're running up here on the hour.
All I can say is wow. This has been just a fantastic session with some really great practical tips for those looking to initiate EFT and ERA. If we do have some questions out there, I know we're running over, but I think it's absolutely worth it if we can extend for a couple of minutes and beg your indulgence. If anyone does have any questions, Tyler, why don't you just tell everybody how they can ask the question?
Absolutely. So as before I had mentioned, there's a hand raise button on your webinar tool, and I can see there we have someone already raising their hand. So what we'll do is if you raise your hand, we'll try to get to you. I'll click the hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. So the first question comes from Karishma. Karishma, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now and I'll allow you to ask the question. Just a second here. All right, here we go. Karishma, are you there?
Hi, yeah. I was just looking at the CAQH website, and then it says that a 999 implementation acknowledgement for each functional group, 835 transaction to indicate the functional group was either accepted, rejected with errors, or rejected. So right now, our health plan does not do the 999. Is that mandatory?
This is Denise. I don't know that we have anybody on the line today that can answer that particular question, since we're kind of focusing on EFT and ERA. So if you would submit that to our CORE box, our email box, which is CORE, C-O-R-E, at CAQH.org, we can have one of our subject matter experts address that for you.
All right, thank you.
And Denise, if I could just jump in for a second here, I do have a comment on that. I work with the Connectivity and Security Subgroup as well as the Technical Work Group for the Connectivity Rule. Right now, the 999 acknowledgement is not something that's currently required. However, there may be some language in the new Phase 4 draft rule. I don't want to speak to that just yet. I would love to get you a formal response, Karishma, so if you wouldn't mind submitting that, we can get you a more formal response.
Great. Thank you, Tyler.
Is there any other hand raises out there, I should say? Any other questions?
Okay, Tyler, why don't you advance us to the next slide?
Can do.
Okay, let's go beyond that. Okay, just as a reminder, there is an appendix of CAQH tools and resources that are attached to this slide presentation. And I know we've run a little bit over our allotted time today, but I think you'll all agree this session has some fantastic information. And if you come up with a question afterwards that you've thought of after we go off air, please submit it to us through the CAQH.org website at core at CAQH.org. And we'll be sure to get you an answer. I'd like to thank our speakers today, including Matthew Albright, Priscilla Holland, Leanne DiDomenico, Eric Brodsky, and Doug Downey, and of course Tyler Schultz, for being with us today. And thank you all for being with us as well. Please remember that we do have a feedback form you'll see immediately after this webinar. So please fill it out and return it to us. And also, an audio version of this presentation will be available on our website 24 hours after the end of this broadcast. And don't forget to check our CORE educational calendar for upcoming events that will be posted very soon, including a new series, a kickoff of our CORE Healthcare Thought Leader series coming in March. So for all of us at CORE, thank you for joining us, and goodbye from Washington, D.C.